Welcome to the Family Office Sherpa podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Parkin, founder and managing director of Hall Road Investments. The aim of this podcast is to provide practical and implementable advice for those looking to build, manage, or service a family office. This is not, however, investment advice, so please check the disclaimer in the show notes. In this episode, I'm going to go through the concept of starting your office from zero.
This is the Family Office Sherpa.
So what does that mean? Well, a contact recently reflected on the fact that when they started an office recently, or when they were looking to start the office recently, they used AI to map the structure, basically to say, this is what we want, give us everything that we need to do. And it's, something I'm sure we've all tried to do, which is to take something that is complex and a lot of moving parts, and there's some personal components to it, and seeing if we can get something that provides a template, something that's, we can just take out this name and put in our name and we're good to go. What I've found is that this really doesn't seem to work. It creates something that is not reflective of what we're trying to do, or it creates something that is trying to wedge someone else's investment philosophy, purpose, structure, things like that, and then homogenizes it, right? Doesn't make it ours. So what I thought it might be interesting to do is to go through the concept of starting from zero. And when I say starting from zero, what I mean is we're starting with you. We're starting with no external components, no external inputs. We're starting with the office, the personalities, the family, all those sort of things, but we're starting with zero, right? So we're starting to build it. What the concept really relies on is we're trying to start from simplicity. I love a simple model. Complexity doesn't necessarily need to be brought in if you don't have to. That means investments, it means structure and everything like that. So instead of taking something complex and pushing it into us, how about we start with something simple, or look at our office and say, how can we start from zero? Even if we've started it 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, last month, last week, whatever it ends up being, can we reflect on it and say, right, we're going to start with the simplest part here and we're going to build it up, right? So what I thought today in this show episode, I thought it might be worthwhile sort of reflecting on the sort of main pillars of the office and how we can start from the ground up. So let's start. First one has to be the purpose statement. So when we look at that, is it reflective, and how rigorous was the process of development? I've seen this work really, really well when given to specialists that know the questions to ask and are extracting it from the family. What I've seen it go poorly is where someone goes, well, this is something that we've got. It's a template. Answer these, 5 or 6 or 20 or whatever the questions are, and then we'll just fill in the gaps. And honestly, that doesn't work, because then you end up getting a version of someone else's. And sometimes it's really the purpose statement or document or constitution or whatever you want to call it is the most important, in my opinion anyway, the most important piece of the governance structure, because without it, nothing else can float, right? So I would say starting from zero there is such an important thing. Getting someone in that can help you build out from that simplicity. I've seen purpose statements that are 2 lines long and they reflect it really easily. And everything that we do subsequent reflects that. And I've seen some that are pages long and again, very reflective. But I've seen different versions of it where it's like, I don't think anyone's bought into this. I think this is just someone said, this is what family offices do. Here's 5 or 6 slight changes. No, start from zero. Next one, investment policy statement. I love working with new families especially ones that either have been challenged by the investment policy statement, like where to start or what it's supposed to do, but also those that have already got one that isn't reflective. And again, you do really see people start to put these through AI, and you do realize that AI, as powerful a tool as it is, it's not a person, and it's not someone that is building something and listening and understanding. So also, don't take a wealth manager's template. I've seen those. And look, they are hamstrung by all sorts of different things, but a lot of the time they're hamstrung by compliance requirements. So when you do see these investment policies written by those that are required to say, this is the definition of what you are as an investor. This is the definitions of this and all the what would you call them? Disclaimers. Basically, you do see a lot of disclaimers built into these types of investment policies. So what I recommend and what I love doing with families, and I'm doing a couple now, which is, we're going to start with an understanding of what the purpose is and how this investment policy reflects it. And we're not doing this because we don't have clients here outside of the family. So we don't have to make it a policy statement that is compliance heavy and all these sorts of things. We can make it just reflective of what they are. So start at the start, and it should be developed alongside the family and alongside the people that work within that family office structure. So the next one, portfolio management. Portfolio management is the implementation of the investment policy. So don't make decisions that aren't for this purpose. Again, what we do see a lot of people do is before these documents and policies are in place, they go out and start investing. They start putting feelers out for wealth managers, brokers, transactions, private equity, all that sort of stuff. And I get that some of these deals look super attractive, but you have to start with the guidance in place. If you don't have that, then what are you doing? How do you size those investments? If you don't have a strategic asset allocation or some version of it, which is determined within the investment policy or those sort of documents, how do you put size in? How do you put risk in? How do you put all these sorts of things? What's the expected return? All these cool, I find them cool, interesting things. But if you don't have a guide, if you don't have something, then I don't know how you are a portfolio manager if you're just going out there and pushing into investments without any sort of idea around what's the outcome that we're looking for here. So if you're looking at the current portfolio and it's not built for this purpose, you need to do something about it. And this is why, again, starting from zero. Is the investment reflective of the investment policy? Yes, no. It's almost like a decision tree. Next one, resourcing. Are the resources appropriate? When you start in the office, a lot of the time, it's the trusted advisor that's come over from the operating business and plus the family. And that is absolutely fine. And I've seen that work incredibly well. But if you're starting at zero, you should look at that resourcing piece and figure out if it is appropriate or if you're just putting bums on seats or if you're just sort of going, well, you, and you, right? Is it relevant? Do you have the right mix of skills and experience? And also what I've seen is if people put off hard decisions around this because they're long-held relationships, and relationships is so important, and I get it. And this is family office, and a lot of the best family offices are built around strong, trusted relationships. But if you're limiting your resources because you prioritize secrecy or anonymity or whatever it ends up being, and you've got a lot of workarounds, and you've got a lot of like, well, we'd love to do this, but we can't because we've got this. Well, these are the conversations that you need to have. So strip it all back and look from the bottom up. Right. Next one, counterparties. These are your counterparties. These aren't someone else's. Do you need 4 wealth managers because someone told you need diversity or competitive tension or something? Or would the office, if you looked at it in a really objective way, benefit from a single core manager, like strong core manager that's important to you, but more importantly, you're important to them. And you get the service, and you get the research, and you get the corporate cuddle you deserve. Also, have you done the RFP, or is it a recommendation? And you just say, yeah, that's they seem fine. They seem to be enjoying that relationship. Well, that seems to be working. No. Start from zero. Think about the counterparties. Think about what your internal resources look like, and then go, what are counterparties that we need? I mean, I know I sound like a bit of a broken record, but scaffolding is so important. And that's what counterparties are. They're your scaffolding. They're your support network. These are the things built around the office that can be transient or can be permanent, but is so important. Do the RFP. Start from what do we need? Where are our gaps? Where we do a proper RFP, we do a proper selection process, we do proper due diligence, stop and do it properly. And be really clear on what the cost versus value for everyone. You're paying people. And I get it that these are good relationships and sometimes there's good tickets to the whatever and sometimes they're good people to hang out with and that's absolutely fine. But what are you paying for here? I think it's just something that needs to be thought about. And if you're paying someone, are you extracting the right amount of value from them? So, the investment committee, such an important thing. Get this right. Start when you put together your investment committee, and I sit on several investment committees. A lot of the time, I'm brought in because, to be honest, sometimes it's structuring that investment committee, and then I end up being on it. But a lot of the time, I'm brought in because I am not part of the office. I'm not a supplier really, because I don't have a wealth manager model or a transaction model or any sort of model where you could say, I will benefit from particular investments or something like that. I'm brought in because I'm governance focused and I'm independent of these. So the right balance and skills and personalities, managing conflict. So I find that if you get an investment committee and you start from zero with that, which is to say, right, what does this governance structure look like for us? And then you start from there. You start at the simplest version, probably having the least amount of members on it, but then you can add members. There's no prescriptive amount of numbers and members and all this sort of stuff that you need to have. I mean, there is best practice, and some of the best practices around longevity and stuff like that, but you can think about that later. When you're starting from zero, you think about the investment committee objectively and the purpose of it, and then you build it from there. Next one, reporting. Well, the last one, reporting. Understand your outputs first with reporting. If you don't need deep analysis and all that sort of stuff, then don't start there. Start with the most basic, what do we need? And a lot of the time, honestly, what you need is a place where all the data is there, it's accurate, it's reconciled, it's efficient to extract. Even if it's down, you got that and it's basically there that anyone can access that needs to. Like we're not have some individual with, some key person risk there. What we need is something that is probably cloud-based, that is extractable and is accurate. And then you can pull it out and you can push it into other platforms and things like that. But I guess what I'm getting to is start with the simplest, most important thing, which is accurate, accessible data. Okay. It's never too late. Start from zero. So like I said, some of the most successful officers I work with are like they are now because at some point they decided to stop and take a look at their structure and to decide if it was reflective of its purpose or if they needed to review or, in some cases, start again. They stopped everything and started mapping out what it should look like. And sometimes this is because there's a change in personnel, there's a change in generation, whatever that looks like. Whatever that looks like for you, it's always worthwhile doing, especially if you're looking at going, this is unwieldy, I don't understand where all the parts are, what that part is, are we in your best practice, all that sort of stuff. So a stop everything review and get down to zero is really, really good. So when you go, what are the basics that we need? And are we building out? Have we made it too complex? Have we not made it sophisticated enough? These are all the things that you should look at. So I just sort of wrote down some points here where some examples of what that looked like, right? So one was they did, like I said, we've had the review and then they made the decision. So they took portfolio management back in-house. That was a big one. They simplified the portfolio, outsourced the heavy lifting and the research and admin, but made the office the decision makers again, the people that actually got the hand on the tiller. They'd seen the investments sort of, slowly slip into their counterparties' philosophies and not theirs. lot of investments where they weren't sure why they were there. They were just sort of taking on the advice or just saying yes to the advice and maybe discretionary account or something. It became opaque and it was very hard to engage with. It actually came from the next generation that asked for this review as they wanted to get involved. And then this review of the office showed that they didn't actually have a handle on how they were invested. And so this is why this was a really good point. And so what they did, they started from zero again. They started and they looked at what they invested in, each purpose of these asset classes, and they still had a really strong investment policy that had been signed off because that was a constant sort of thing. So it was really good for them to go, well, this doesn't reflect this anymore. So I think that was a really good version of it. Another one is they removed staff that, despite great experience and deep knowledge, just really didn't fit personalities of the family. Like their personality didn't fit. And they were finding that it was causing more conflict and complexity when it didn't need to. Another one was, again, the investment policy was written by a wealth manager. And it was, like I said, reflective more on the compliance and things like that than it was around reflective of what their investment policy was. Another, and this I thought was really interesting, was they changed the way they track performance in certain asset classes. For years, they just use IRR. But they wanted to, what they wanted to do is really understand not IRR, not some version of that. They wanted to have some sort of total value paid in or money on invested capital. We sent $1 out. What did we get back? And especially at the moment where you're seeing distribution paid in as another metric. So what are we actually getting paid back to us as opposed to some figure of internal rate of return or something, how quickly the investments are returning these figures. We wanted to know, we put $1 out. We want $1.10 back or $2 back or whatever it ends up being. So I thought that was really interesting. And they had to educate the family members on why they were changing that. Another one removed a beloved, but unfortunately underskilled accountant and tax advisor. And this was a really hard one. And it was a tough decision. But ultimately what it did allow for is almost an influx of improved governance in tax and in particular on the tax side and the trust structures. And what it ended up doing was it simplified a lot of these trust structures as well. There was a lot of trust. And what the advice that we got from the more sophisticated tax advisor was this, and this, and it made a massive difference. But it was a hard conversation to have, but it was a necessary one. Another one, again, another hard conversation was when on the investment committee, they removed the conflicted IC members. And that was tough, but it was necessary too, because these IC members, whilst there was no, they were doing their job and things like that, they were so heavily conflicted in terms of the way that the investments were made that they realized after this review that there's a lack of independence in the investment committee. Another one decided to pay up for higher cost legal. Another one removed a family member as the investment head because they realized that on a resourcing and a skills base, it wasn't their bailiwick. Another one established an effective decision tree, which made life so much easier and removed a lot of conflict. Another one, importantly, got a very well credentialed and very well referred family dynamics consultant in because they realized that a lot, when they started with zero, when they went back to the brass tacks and the simplification here, they realized that most of the issues was a dynamics issue. It wasn't necessarily anything else. It was conflict internally. And the last one, and I think this is such a good thing to do as well, which is they started to bring the next generation of the family council, started to bring people. They realized, they went, oh, the purpose of the family council is this, but we don't have no representatives of the next generation. They're not engaged. So, and that only came from the review. So hopefully that's helpful. I think one of the great things about my job a lot of the time is that I get to be that external critical friend for a lot of these components. And it is sometimes helpful to have someone come in that has seen what what good looks like. And also just to have an eye for, I can see if we start with zero, we can build something that is reflective of what we're trying to achieve here, is potentially simplified, but most importantly, it's fit for purpose. If you're interested in understanding how I work with clients, please feel free to email me, Shaun, so SHAUN @wholeroad.com.au. You can ping me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I'll probably get back to you. If you're a family office and you just want to have a chat, I'm more than happy to do that, so we can set it up wherever you are globally. If you're enjoying the podcast, please ding the little alert bell so you'll get the next one. And until next time, happy listening. Thanks.